Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. So we have like a lot going on today. We have a new puppy, which I will show you guys what he looks like right here. He's super cute. And we are working on training him. And I also have a trip coming up. And I need to get a few things in my freezer to make like getting ready for that trip a lot easier. So the night that we leave, I need to be able to have a freezer meal I can pull out of the freezer, stick in the oven, and just cook. So today we are going to work on that. And then I also I need to get like a side to go with that in the freezer too. So we're gonna work on that. And we're running low on like snack things. So to avoid purchasing any of that stuff, I need to get some sort of a dessert in the freezer. So I think I am going to do a cheesecake with that. And then I'm going to show you guys what I'm going to work on for our freezer meal that we're going to do today. So thought I'd bring you guys along with me and show you some of our favorite stuff to make and just have in our freezer. So whenever you're baking a cheesecake, the kind of most annoying part is not actually making the cheesecake part itself. It's getting everything else ready. So I need to make a crust for it, and I need to prep my cheesecake pan. So I have a 9-inch springform pan. You do that and bottom comes out, which is what you want. You need help?
I think so.
Okay. So once you have the correct pan, because you do need something like this, if you want like a cheesecake that pops out of the pan, you have to have a springform pan. Then I am going to prep it. So I am going to spray it. If you don't want to use spray, I totally understand. You can also just butter it. I'm not actually super concerned about the cheesecake coming off of the bottom of it. But I do want to make sure that the cheesecake comes out from around the sides. So I'm going to use parchment paper, and I'm going to cut just a piece of parchment paper just to go around, line the edges. And because I sprayed it, it's just going to stick to it all nice. Okay. Just like that, there's half. And my butter browning for the crust part as well. I'm gonna add a little bit of spray just to the back of this, just to kind of work as a glue to hold that paper on there. Okay, so with that, our pan is prepped and ready to go. So the next thing I'm gonna do is make my crust. So I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees because I'm going to bake my crust while I am making the actual filling. So for my crust, I need graham cracker crumbs. So you can purchase just graham cracker crumbs, but I just have graham crackers, so that's what we're going to use. And you need about 7 or so ounces. You can get crazy and measure it if you want to. That's about one of these packs and a half. We also have some woodwork going on. So you guys hear a saw in the background. My son is working on that right now. That looks about right. So I'm gonna just give my blender a head start. Break these up a little bit. And then I'm going to whir this up in the blender and make my own graham cracker crumbs. There we go. So in about 30 seconds, maybe less than that, I have some freshly crumbed graham crackers. So I'm going to pour that into a bowl. And then I have some browned butter. I have about 5 tablespoons of that. Browning your butter is just going to give it like an extra layer of flavor, which is really nice in a cheesecake. And then the only other thing that is going to go in our crust is going to be just a couple of tablespoons of sugar. So I'm going to give this a mix, and it's going to start to look like wet sand, and that's exactly what you want. So once you get that wet sand texture, I should be able to pick it up and hold it together, and it'll kind of hold its shape. I am going to pour it into the bottom of my springform pan that we've prepped. And I'm going to start using my hands to kind of start to spread that out. But really, the easiest thing to do is I like to grab some sort of mug or cup or something. This is my Gryffindor one. If you wondered what house I'm in, it's Gryffindor. And then I am going to use the bottom of this and the sides of this. You just need it to be like a straight edge on there to start to push my crust all on the bottom and then up the sides. This is also going to help compact your crust in there so that it's just going to stay together really nicely whenever you cut the cheesecake later on. So once I have that pressed down for what I feel like is sufficient enough, then I am going to stick this in my preheated 350-degree oven for about 10 minutes. Did a quick clean of my work surface because while my cheesecake crust is baking, I'm actually going to get started on the next thing that we're going to do, and that is some homemade pasta. So this is actually one of the easiest things you can make if you have a pasta attachment for your stand mixer. Now I will say you can get them from a very specific brand. I just got one off of Amazon. I think I paid like 15 bucks for it, and it has lasted years at this point and worked just as well as that big name brand one. So I'm going to get some pasta kind of put together, and this recipe is actually extremely simple. You are going to use, for every 1 cup of flour, you're going to use 2 eggs, and then I'm just going to add like a pinch of salt, and that is all you're going to need. If you find that it is just too dry, because all eggs are different sizes, then you can add just a little bit of water, just a tiny bit, a teaspoon, a tablespoon at a time at most. And then if you find that it's too wet because your eggs were too big, then you can just add a little bit of flour. So we actually have an overabundance of duck eggs right now, so I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that in my pasta, and then I'm also going to use that in the cheesecake. So we're going to clear some duck eggs out today. We have a duck egg allergy that if I just scramble them, then some of the people in our house get sick. But I found that if I bake with them or use them in something like pasta, that doesn't happen. So we're going to use that today for that. So I'm going to start out with 6 eggs, so I'm going to do 3 cups of flour. Duck eggs are huge compared to chicken eggs, and because of that, I can almost guarantee I'm going to end up needing more flour, but that's alright. So from there, I'm going to keep my flour on this side just so that I have easy access to it. I'm going to make a well, and then I am going to add my eggs right here in the middle. I actually did 5 eggs, my bad. And then you're going to start, I have a bench scraper just to kind of make it a little easier. I'm going to break those yolks up. I'm just going to go back and forth. Just kind of scraping up any egg that oozes out back into that flour. Once you find that you're kind of like this, where you're not like having egg go everywhere, I like to go ahead and add a good couple of sprinklings of salt in there. Now I'm going to do this until I start to have a dough form. And if you're wondering why you don't just do this in a stand mixer, it is because this dough is extremely thick, and a stand mixer is just not going to cut it to make pasta dough. So at this point, when it just kind of looks like a pile of flour, honestly, it's time to get your hands in there. So I'm going to start just kind of kneading it together, just like that. So I can see that this is The flour has pretty much soaked up the moisture and it is still pretty dry. So at this point I have a couple of options. I can add another egg. I can add some olive oil if you want to add a little bit more fat, but because I'm using duck eggs and the yolks are so big on duck eggs, which means there's a lot more fat in them, I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to add some water. I think we're good on adding the water now. So I'm going to start just kind of pushing this together and kneading it. And at this point, I'm going to start looking at my clock because you want to knead this for a good solid 10 minutes. I've been kneading it for about a minute now. You can see that it is still a very slack dough, but it is in fact a dough that is kneadable. It's not just a pile on my countertop anymore. Okay, so I've been going for about 2 minutes. I have most of the flour worked in. So at this point, I'm just kind of focusing on just getting it the consistency that I want it to be. I've been going for about 4 minutes now. You can see that this consistency is completely changed, which is great. It's a little bit tacky on my hands. So I'm actually just gonna put some flour on my hand, just like that. Very, very light. I did have to pause just to take my cheesecake crust out of the oven, but that's okay. This is quite a good little arm workout. We're at 7 minutes and it's starting to feel like it's almost there. Okay, I hit my 10 minutes and it is smooth. I am pretty tired from doing that now, so I am going to let this rest. It needs to rest completely sealed up. A Ziploc bag, you can wrap it in cling wrap, whatever, but it has to be completely sealed up, airtight, so that it does not dry out. So I have mine in a Ziploc bag. It needs to rest for at least half an hour, but I'm probably going to let mine rest for a couple of hours while I kind of get everything else done in my kitchen that I need to get done before I get started on actually making the manicotti. So now we are going to, my pasta dough is resting. My cheesecake crust is baked and cooled, and so I'm gonna get started on making like the easiest part of the cheesecake, and that is the actual cheesecake. So I am going to start with 4 bricks of cream cheese. I get these at Sam's Club, so they come in a box of 4 bricks, and that cuts the cost down on this pretty considerably. Cheesecake may be something that most people don't think of as a freezer thing, but I made cheesecake one time, long time ago, years and years ago, and there was no way we were going to eat that whole thing before it went bad. Especially a cheesecake like this, they're pretty tall, and so you don't need a huge slice of it, so you can get a lot of slices out of one cheesecake. But there was no way we were going to eat it, so I thought I'm just going to try to freeze this. Everything that is in it freezes pretty well, and so I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens. And so what I did was I sliced it up and then put individual slices. So I wrapped each individual slice in saran wrap and stuck it in the freezer. And then once it froze completely solid, I took it out and I put it in a Ziploc bag, just all the pieces in a Ziploc bag. And then whenever we wanted to slice the cheesecake, it was already made. All you have to do is take it out and let it sit at room temperature for about 20 minutes. And it is the perfect consistency. So now that I have my 4 bricks of cream cheese in here, which is 32 ounces in total, I'm going to add 2 cups of sugar to that. I'm going to cream this together until it just kind of comes together and is nice and kind of fluffy. Once I get that creamed together really nicely, I am going to add in a 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream. And I'm going to turn that on, just kind of pulsing it so that the cream doesn't go everywhere. And I'm going to blend that together really good, but before I do that, I'm actually going to scrape down the sides of my bowl. That is super creamy looking, looks great. So the next thing that I'm going to add is some flour. So I have a lot of fat and liquid in here, so I'm going to add some flour. That's just going to add some structure to your cheesecake. So I'm going to add 5 tablespoons. I don't necessarily need that to be like blend it in fully. So I'm going to add 2 cups of sour cream right now. I'm also going to add about half a teaspoon of kosher salt and about a tablespoon of vanilla extract. And then with my mixer running, the last thing that I'm going to incorporate are 4 eggs. So I have pre-cracked my eggs. Again, I'm just using duck eggs because that's what we have, but you can use whatever eggs, it doesn't really matter. You just want the equivalent of 4 eggs in there. I'm gonna add 1 at a time. You do not want to overmix your cheesecake batter. So I am pretty comfortable where I'm at right now. I'm gonna scrape down my sides 1 more time and then give it 1 more mix. And then we're gonna call that good. So my crust is nice and cooled and my cheesecake filling is just gonna go right in. So this is gonna completely fill up this 9-inch springform pan. If you have a 10-inch, it won't fill it quite as full because it's wider. But that's another reason that I like to have this parchment paper on the outside, because it's going to really keep it in. It's going to keep it from spilling if it does, because it's going to puff up a little bit, but it's going to stay nice and contained. Now I still have my oven on at 350, which is what you want to bake this at, but you want to bake it in a water bath. So I have some really hot water going, and I'm actually going to pull out and put my cheesecake right in the middle of it. And then this is going to go in the top rack of my oven. And once I get it in the oven, then I will pour, hold on. I just remembered a really important point. We have to wrap the bottom of this thing. So I'm going to wrap it in foil because I am baking it in a water bath. And if you bake it in a water bath and the water gets in, it's going to ruin your cheesecake. It's going to ruin the crust. So I'm going to, this is how I do it. I like to wrap up the sides. I have 2 pieces of foil laid down, wrap up the sides, and roll up the ends. Okay. 2 good berries there. Same thing here, and then wrap up the sides. And then roll up the ends. That looks better. So now I'm going to stick this in the middle of my sheet pan. I'm going to put this in the oven. Once I get it in the oven, then I'm going to put some really hot water in the bottom of this, taking very special care to not splash any in the actual cheesecake or get it inside the foil, because again, that's going to ruin everything. So our pasta dough has set and rested for several hours now at this point. So we're gonna get started on making the manicotti. So my girls, actually my older 2 girls actually help me with this every time. And I love it. It's such a fun thing, like, to get in the kitchen and do together. So before they get in here, I am going to start prepping broke off. I'm gonna start prepping the inside for the manicotti, so like the cheese mixture. So I'm going to start with, because I'm actually making 2 full meals worth of manicotti for our family of 6 out of this. I am going to start with 4 cups, or 2 of these, well, almost 4 cups, because these are 15 ounces, of ricotta cheese. I definitely prefer to use the whole milk ricotta whenever I can, but the store had 1 thing of whole milk ricotta when I went to Aldi to get this, so that's all right. We're going to go with 1 whole milk and then 1 part skim. And then to that, I'm going to add 1 egg. That's just going to help kind of bind everything and keep it together. And then we have a bunch of mozzarella that we made from fresh milk that we had gotten from a friend of ours. So I'm going to put a good amount of this that got shredded right in there with it. Probably about a cup and a half. And then some of this is just going to go on top of the manicotti while it's being cooked. You can add whatever seasonings you like to it. I like some salt and pepper and a little bit of garlic powder, so that's what I'm going to add to mine. And we're going to give this a good mix, and then we will take a Ziploc bag and put all of this in a Ziploc bag and then snip the end off, and then my girls will use that to pipe it onto our pasta sheets.
Well, the rolling out part seems kind of annoying.
Yeah, that's kind of the worst. Okay, so I have my pasta maker attachment. It is this brand, whatever that is, Kofun, I don't know. But it just attaches onto the front of your KitchenAid stand mixer. You can also get like a one that attaches to the side of the countertop, and those are good too. They just usually are a hand crank, and I like this because it's not hand cranked. Okay, so I have my dough, and I am going to split this into 4 pieces. And then the pieces that I'm not working with first are gonna go back in because I do not want these to dry out while I'm working with the rest of it. So they're gonna go back in the Ziploc bag and set aside. And then I'm going to start at my biggest number. I'm gonna take my pasta dough and I'm gonna try to form it in kind of like a flat, long disc. And then with my pasta maker thing, on the biggest number, I am going to turn it on and roll this through. So once that's rolled through, I have this shape. I'm gonna fold in the ends, push it back together so that it's folded like this, and then I'm gonna run it through again on the 8. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this shape because I want it to be as close to a rectangle as I can get it. So now I'm gonna run it through again on the 8, and then every other number I'm gonna run it through twice. Every time you run it through, it's gonna get thinner and it's gonna get longer. So now I'm gonna run it through the 6 twice. So once I hit about a 2 or a 3, I need a second set of hands. So pull one of my girls in to start helping me with that. Okay, so we're done with our first. So they have the filling in a Ziploc bag and they snipped the end off. And we have our long sheet of dough just on a piece of parchment paper so that it's easier to deal with. And then they'll go maybe about 4, 5, 6 inches between each row of the filling. And then once they get filling on all of them, they're going to cut between that and roll it up. And then these will individually go into the freezer where they're not touching each other and freeze completely solid before we do anything else with them. So along with our freezer manicotti, I am also going to do some garlic cheese rolls. And I'm going to show you how I cook them both fresh and how I freeze them for later use. So I'm going to start with 2 1/4 cups of nice hot water, just the hottest that I can get from the tap. And then to that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of yeast. And then on top of that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. If you don't want to use sugar, you can do 2 tablespoons of honey. But my honey is over there and my sugar's right here, so I'm going to use the sugar. Then on top of that, I'm gonna add 6 cups of just all-purpose flour. Then to my flour, I'm gonna add a tablespoon of salt. Then I'm gonna grab my dough hook to knead this all together. I'm gonna go ahead and start kneading this. And I'm gonna put all this other stuff away, and then I'm gonna grab my butter. So I'm gonna add just a good amount of softened butter to that. Probably about 4 to 5 tablespoons. So I can just tell by looking at this that it definitely needs some more water. So I'm probably gonna throw another, maybe a little less than 1/4 cup of water in here, and then knead it a little bit more. Okay, so my dough is finished for my garlic cheese rolls, and it just needs to rise. So I'm going to pull it off of it's a little bit sticky, but that's all right. I'm going to pull it off of the dough hook, and then I'm going to cover it and set it just in a nice warm spot and let it rise for about an hour until it doubles in size. So this half I am going to roll out just in a nice rectangle. Once we get it about to this point, I have some butter melted. I'm going to brush butter on top of it. So once I have my butter on, I am going to sprinkle on a healthy dose of granulated garlic or garlic powder. And from there, I'm just going to sprinkle on a good amount, not a crazy amount, a good amount of shredded mozzarella cheese. So this is actually someplace that you got to be a little careful, because you do not want to overfill it, but you want enough to where it's, cheesy goodness. So once I get my cheese on there and get it kind of spread out, then I am going to, once I have it rolled up, I'm going to slice this into 12 even pieces, and I'm going to put it in a greased 9x13 pan and set it aside and let it rise for about half an hour to 45 minutes. Okay, so I have my second batch all done, and they are not touching, they're on a cookie sheet, and I'm going to set this aside because I'm going to clean this up, and then I'm going to trade out one of the things of Manicotti that I have because it's time to get that started. I have my oven preheating to 350, and I'm going to open up a jar of pasta sauce, one that we canned from our garden, and I'm going to start my manicotti for dinner. So I am going to do a nice little layer. Let's use that. Spread that out just to have a nice base for manicotti to lay on. And then these are frozen, not completely through, but pretty close. So I am going to lay them in there, and I am not going to have them like right up on touching each other, because just like pasta from a bag, if you put that in a pan and have it like on top of each other, then it's going to stick together. So once I have a layer of that down, I'm going to do a little bit more sauce. Let's try to get some sauce on each one. And then I'm going to do another layer of manicotti. So this doesn't look like a ton in the pan, but I promise this is going to kind of puff up as it cooks. And it's going to make a lot of pasta, a good amount for our family. So I'm going to do one more layer of sauce. Okay. And then I'm going to top that with some more shredded cheese. Okay, so I'm going to cover this with foil and put this in my preheated 350-degree oven for about 45 minutes. And about 15 minutes or so into the cooking, I will put my pan of garlic cheese knots in as well. So in the meantime, my cheesecake is all cooked. It did crack, but that's all right. It's still edible. And I'm going to pull my foil off. And this is going to go in the refrigerator overnight. And tomorrow, I'm going to take it out and slice it, and we will wrap it in individual pieces of saran wrap, and then stick that back in the freezer. When they're completely frozen through, I will put them all in a Ziploc bag together, but our cheesecake is done. So I have our manicotti all vacuum sealed up. These are frozen solid. And I have our garlic cheese rolls, frozen solid, and these are vacuum sealed up. And these both will last in the freezer for a couple of months at least. They never stay in our freezer that long though. So the garlic cheese rolls, in order to bake these, I will take them out a few hours before, maybe even like the morning if I'm gonna eat them that evening for dinner. And I'll put them in a greased 9x13 pan, set them in a nice warm place. Once they're fully like risen, they'll defrost completely, they'll double in size, and then they'll be ready to bake. So these are super easy. And then same thing, well, no, completely different, I guess, with this. I will take these out, do a layer of marinara sauce on the bottom of my pan, put these in a layer, another layer of marinara sauce, another layer of these, marinara sauce, just like a lasagna. Cheese on top, cover it with foil. These will bake for 45 minutes to an hour until they are completely done. They're gonna puff up a little bit and just be super yummy. So this is gonna make a very simple meal here in a couple of weeks whenever we need it. So other than that, I'm just going to pull my cheesecake out of the refrigerator, chop it up, and go ahead and wrap it up and get that in the freezer. But that's it, guys. That is one of my favorite things to make sure that we have in our freezer. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.